I had so many souls saying that they did not want to be born and they were forced. They would cry and they would say, I don't want to come. I don't want to do it. They made me. And they were dreading this world. And I don't know why it changed.
Could you share with us what happens to a soul after they pass on?
Yes, this is very interesting.
I recently booked an appointment with Jamie of Refractive Healing. During my appointment, she worked on my energy to relieve the pain of a sore throat. Afterwards, she used her intuitive gifts to give me specific guidance. I followed her advice and found that my ability to channel and receive guidance from my guides on the other side was greatly enhanced. I am still benefiting from Jamie's beautiful gifts, and I would like to share this with you. Book your free distant healing session today at refractivehealing.com. Thank you to Refractive Healing for partnering with me in this video.
I am very excited to be here again with Stephanie Kraft. Thank you so much for joining me, Stephanie.
Melissa, thank you so much for having me.
I really appreciate you coming back to continue this conversation because the last hour that we talked went by so quickly, and I realized we had so much more to talk about. So I'm really grateful that you were willing to come back and do this.
Yeah, I'm so happy to do this with you.
Wonderful. So I know we got into this just a little bit in our last interview, but for those who are maybe watching this one first, could you just share how you got into, like, how did you get interested in life between lives therapy?
So it was actually a client of mine, or she was a friend too, but who brought it to my attention. So I had become a hypnotherapist in 2004, and I was just doing, everything you can think of with hypnotherapy, including past life regressions. And I didn't know anything about the life between lives. But I had been obsessively pondering, what happens when we die? I really want to know what it's like on the other side. What do we do? What happens? I was just obsessed with those questions in my mind. Nobody knew that. I didn't, talk about it. I was just constantly wondering about it. So, but anyway, one day my friend sent me an email and the subject line said, I want to do this. And so I opened it up. And it was an article about someone who had had a life between lives hypnotherapy session. And I read it and I was just astonished that it existed. And I thought to myself, okay, this is why I became a hypnotherapist. I never really understood what's the reason, but that day I was like, this is the reason. And this might be the answer to all of my questions. And so I wrote back to her. Well, I looked up the training. So I was like, well, of course I'm going to get trained in this. And it was going to be in several months, like later that year. And I told my friend, I'm going to go get trained in it. So I can do this with you. And she said, no, Stephanie, I'm not waiting. You have to do it with me now. And so Michael Newton, who developed Life Between Lives hypnotherapy, had written 2 books, Destiny of Souls and Journey of Souls. Well, Journey of Souls was the first one, then Destiny of Souls. But he also wrote a 3rd book called Life Between Lives Hypnotherapy. And that's for hypnotherapists to kind of learn how to do sessions. I mean, you have to get trained in it, but at least there's a book he wrote about it. So I got that book. She said, I'm not waiting for you to get trained. Do it now. Get the book, figure it out. So I ordered the book. I read the book, and then I did a session with her that was phenomenal, perfect in every way. And then several months later, I went to get trained in LBL hypnotherapy. And I was so lucky. That was in 2007. I was so lucky because Michael Newton had retired, but he came out of retirement for my training. My training was the last training that he was present at. And so it was an amazing experience, phenomenal week. It was a 40-hour training week. Plus, then I had to do many hours of sessions before I could get certified. You have to do all of these sessions and record them and write them up and send them in. And they get reviewed by people at the Institute. So at the Michael Newton Institute. So that was the process of learning life between lives hypnotherapy. That was in 2007, 15 years ago. So I've been doing it ever since.
Wow, it's amazing to me that Michael Newton was at your training.
I know. I was so lucky.
Yeah, because as I was telling you off camera, I love his books. I just devoured his books.
Yeah. Yeah. They
But
are.
yeah, I agree. So could you share with us, and I'm going to ask you questions based off of your professional experience with regressing people and what you have learned from these different people's experience. Could you share with us what happens to a soul after they pass on?
So, yes. So, the way, maybe if people are curious, should I explain what the session is like? And
Sure.
so
Yeah, that's a
'cause
great
people
idea.
probably don't even know. Right? I
Yeah.
mean, some people do, but basically, we do a long induction that's to get the person into hypnosis. And then we go into the womb, which is fascinating because when you take a person into the womb, they're not yet crossed over to this side. They're still on the other side. And that's when we can even start asking the life between lives questions. So when someone is in the womb, a soul is in the womb, we ask so many questions about, did you, the soul, merge with the body of the baby? And the answer to that is fascinating because it's so varied. Some souls merge with the fetus, maybe in the 4th or 5th month, or some in the 8th or 9th month. And I always ask, do you come and go, or do you just stay there? And most of them say, I come and go and I leave because it's really boring. And so the soul is not always present in the body of the baby. It's visiting on the other side still. And because otherwise they're just like, literally present in the body. And we always ask, can you feel your mother's emotions? And they always, there's always responses to that. What about your father? What's the family situation? Why did you choose his parents? Or did you choose your parents' family members? All these questions, right, in the womb. And sometimes, or I will always ask, why did you choose this life? Why did you choose this body? Why did you choose this family? What are you coming here to learn? What's your purpose? Why did you come into this life? How do you feel about the life you're about to live? Things like that. So we do the whole womb experience. And sometimes people don't have a lot of answers. Some souls do, some souls don't really know that much. It's varied from person to person. And then in this session, we take the person back to childhood just to do some memory warm-ups of like her earliest memory, happy memory as a child, just to keep going with the deepening and regressing. And then finally, then we take the person we guide. It's all guiding. It's not a hypnotherapist doesn't lead. I mean, we guide, but it's more of an allowing. So we guide them and then to another lifetime. So a past life. Sometimes I don't like to say past life because they're all happening at the same time, but that's the terminology we all use, right? So another lifetime. And so then they arrive into that lifetime and we go through a long exploration of that entire life. And we ask, do you recognize any of these souls as people that you know in your life now? And always, yes. And always the past life is so incredibly relevant to this lifetime. It's like a continuation of a theme and story that it just has sort of twists and turns, variations on the theme, like, oh, that was my husband, now I'm the wife, or just roles are switched, father, daughter, all the different family members are friends. A lot of times people have, their best friend is now their daughter in this lifetime. Just so many continuations of having lifetimes with the same souls, and then the same kind of situations or situations that need to be resolved, or karma playing out where, one time I did this to you, this time I'm doing this to you. It's fascinating. So we explore that lifetime all the way through. And this is when we get to the life between lives part, right? When we bring them to the last day of their life. So when we say, okay, be at the last day of your life. And then we ask, how are you dying? Who's there? What's happening? Describe the situation. And then when it's time, once we get through all that and whatever information is coming up, I say, okay, leave the body at the time of death. And always leaving the body at the time of death is like nothing. It's just like a non-occurrence. There's no trauma, nothing. It's just, oh, now I'm looking at the body and I see everybody around me and they're crying, and this is generalizations, right? Because sometimes people are alone, but it's just a general overview. And then, I'll ask, do you stay and linger? What are you doing now? Or do you leave? And then the ones who leave right away, they don't linger behind. They don't try to console anybody. They just shoot out to space or whatever you call it. And I ask, like, are you moving? Are you being pulled? What is it like? What does it feel like? I don't lead. I mean, to talk to you about it and the audience who's listening, I'm using a lot of words, but it's better for a hypnotherapist to sort of keep asking the questions, what's happening now? What's happening now? So even though I'm sharing like words that might be, we would call it leading a client, I don't do that in the session. Just, what do you feel like? What's happening? So it's hard to, I can't just say that to you, like, but this is what they tell me. I'm being pulled, or I'm slowly moving, or I'm fast, or I've arrived, or, it's all the different ways to get there. And sometimes they're surrounded by just darkness, but it's very comfortable. And sometimes it's light, but sometimes they are met by a guide. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they meet with their soulmate that they have missed, that either from that lifetime or this one. It's really interesting because when the person crosses over out of that past life that we just visited, the themes are usually relevant to that lifetime. So it's, I'm meeting with my husband. And then we go through like themes related to that life. And then I ask, question. They always bring questions, right? So then we kind of shift it to this lifetime. So we have both going on. And sometimes even while we're there on the other side, I will say, because once they're there on the other side, their soul is channeling through them now. It's not the person anymore so much. There's both happening because of our consciousness, but the soul is now able to speak through the person. And I will ask questions directly to the soul. Do you want to take Melissa do you want to show Melissa any other lifetimes? Even though we've crossed over already, they can say yes or no, and then they'll send the person right back to another lifetime to explore. I keep that open. I don't know if other LBL hypnotherapists do it. I mean, all the sessions are so different, but I like to ask just in case there are more lifetimes to explore. So we'll do that. We'll come back. But that was a long answer. I'm sure you have a lot of questions to ask.
No, that was perfect, just to give people a background on what you do in case they're not familiar with it. But it's fascinating for me to hear your process, because I think, like you said, everyone does it a little bit differently. So one thing that caught my attention is you said you ask the individuals first of all, what their purpose is in coming to this life. Do you find that there's one overriding similar purpose, or is it all over the board?
That is a great question. And, a lot of people do have this question, what is my purpose? And a lot of times I think that people think it's about doing something in this lifetime, but really it's always the virtues. It's always to love, to forgive, to have compassion, or resiliency, things that to endure, to not give up, it varies from person to person. Some people have had lifetimes, it can vary. So they'll have a lifetime with a lot of people around and family. So then they test out lifetimes alone, which can be really hard, but they do it again and again to get better at it. It seems, and based on my clients, and it's just like, I think they're just trying to prove it to themselves that they can do it. So things that are really internal. Can I do this better? How well can I do this? Being traumatized and then learning to love unconditionally or forgive or protect themselves, or use their voice, speak up for themselves, whatever it might be. But it always comes back to generally these virtues and of how well we handle situations. I've never heard a person say, oh, it's to write a book, or it's to become a stock, trade in the stock market, or it's never a thing to do. It's always these internal processes of becoming a better, more refined human.
Wow, that's fascinating and right in line with what near-death experiencers say also.
Yes, there are the similarities between life between lives hypnotherapy sessions and NDEs are astounding.
Yeah. Another thing that caught my attention is that you said you'll ask them how they're feeling about the life. So I'm just curious if people are excited or are they scared, or have you ever run across somebody who feels like they were forced into it?
Yes. So this is very interesting because for many years in the beginning of doing this, I had so many souls saying that they did not want to be born and they were forced to come here, and they would cry and they would say, I don't want to come. I don't want to do it. They made me. And they were dreading this life and this world. But then it's weird, and I don't know why it changed. So after the first several years of experiencing souls like that, and honestly, a lot of those were trying to get back. When I would be doing the womb part of the session, some of them would be crying and so afraid to be born that they would be saying, I'm trying to get back. I'm trying to go back home, and they won't let me. And they're making me go through with this lifetime. And I would ask who, and I don't know who they are, but they would never really be able to explain. And I don't know why it changed, but then after many years of that, all of the souls now and it's the same age, still just a few years later, it's the same age as like, our lifetime, right, of people saying, I would ask, these questions, and I would say, how are you feeling about this life that you're about to be born into? And almost everybody now says, I'm excited. So I don't know if I changed timelines or what happened, but there have been shifts in life between lives hypnotherapy sessions from 2007 until now, not just mine, but across the board that's another thing that has changed. I don't know if it's the consciousness that has changed on the planet or what has happened, but before, and especially in Michael Newton's work, and then subsequent, the trainings of LBL therapists after that, the way that he described the sessions would be the way that they would happen in a way. Like you would be met by a guide, you would meet with your soul group, you would go to these different places. At some point in the beginning of when I started doing this 15 years ago, my sessions became automatically somewhat different, where they would just be in their soul state and channeling their soul information and not needing a guide to meet with them and not needing to go to these different places. It became very much pure dialogue of the soul sharing information. So that's a change that has happened since he wrote the books. And it's not just me, it's the LBL hypnotherapists are experiencing the same thing, similar things. And I can't speak for everybody, but we've said that this has been happening.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Do you have an opinion, like a personal opinion on what that shift might be?
That to me immediately just says that we're becoming more aware and that we may not need as much hand holding, because when the guides, sometimes before, people would say, I don't know where to go, or I don't know what to do. And I would say, well, look around, do you see anything? And, or a guide would come right away. Sometimes there's a light in the distance, and we just help them let the light come closer or go closer to the light. And it always usually turns out to be a being to help or something. But I think it must be the expansion and evolution of human consciousness that must be translating into, when we cross over, we we feel more confident about just being there and knowing what to do. It doesn't really make logical sense to me, my answer, even because how did anything change from one year to the next? And haven't we always done this? So I don't know the answer, but it is interesting to observe.
Right. Yeah, it's fascinating to me to hear about that. And I have another question related to this topic. And I know you said you don't know the answer, so that's fine, but I just figured you seem like a good person to ask. On the internet over the last few years, I've been talking about near-death experiences I've been studying them for a long time. And I didn't see this until very recently, but like over the last year or two, this idea has been like gaining prominence in the near-death experience community, that this idea that Earth is a prison and the guides are actually malevolent beings and they're forcing us to come back here over and over and over. Based on your experience, do you see any evidence for that?
I did start to see that, and I did start to wonder about that. Not that I did start to see that concretely,
Yeah.
but I started to wonder about that, and I had read a lot about that. And early on, I have an interesting journey with this life between lives hypnotherapy, because when I discovered that concept, and it really did relate to all of these clients, that almost all that were saying that they were forced to come here and that they didn't want to, I actually stopped doing LBL hypnotherapy. And then because of that, this was in around 2009 or something. And then I'm guided by my soul. So whatever my higher self or my soul is pushing me to do, I'll do. And eventually it came back around because people were calling me a lot for sessions. And I finally ended up starting up again. I was only on a short pause. I mean, I don't know if it was 6 months or a year that I decided not to do them because of this, but then everything kind of changed, like I told you. So I don't know, it could be that the concept is that the astral plane, it's like we leave this earth and the other side immediately after would be like the astral plane. And that's what they're saying was corrupted and would recycle us back. And there would be the controlling forces there. I almost feel like perhaps there was a cleanup of that. And that's why the sessions may have changed, because it was crossing over. It was into the astral plane where those beings were. And then that's what the sessions were like, kind of like the way Michael Newton wrote about them. And then when I started up again, people were bypassing that whole realm and going directly to probably like a higher level where there weren't the things that he would describe in the book. And so, what's interesting too is that I'm a rebel, and I don't follow what mainstream says or anybody usually. And so I had discussions with Michael Newton about things that I didn't agree with because I wasn't having them in my sessions. And I don't want to stir up controversy, but we did have an online forum for the hypnotherapists, and he was part of it. He would participate with all of us. And this is where I would have my discussions with him in our forum. And I would ask a lot of questions and say, this is not happening. This is what it's like in my session. So I'm not a rule follower. And a lot of the things that he wrote about seemed like rules, like this color equals this level of soul evolution. And in my sessions, it was completely different. So I had a very interesting session one time where the soul this was a level of a guide. The soul was a guide. And also, I think he even says guides don't incarnate, but that's not true in my sessions. Guides do incarnate. And so this soul was with their soul group, and they were all guides, and each one had a different color. And so when you're on the other side, you're a light being and you have a color. You can change colors or, be a mixture. But this client, it described the meaning of each color, and the purpose. Each color had a different frequency or purpose. And it was to guide people. This one is compassion. I don't remember the colors, and this guide helps, with the theme of compassion. This one is for inspiration, creativity, and they each and they're all. And I would ask, are they equal like levels, or yes, you can't compare or put in a hierarchy what color is higher than another, or what theme or quality is more important than another or higher than another. So I have found, and a lot of other hypnotherapists, LBL therapists have said this too, that the colors that he wrote about are not like the way that he says in terms of an evolution of a soul. They're all equal and just have different purposes or meanings. They're healing. There are colors for a healer soul, and they can even vary. So soul groups are so varied and different with their specialties. So going back to your question, I went on a tangent there, but I feel like perhaps there has been a cleanup of some of that, and that we are going directly to a higher realm beyond the astral plane in our sessions. And I think that's actually the answer to the question that you had asked before, and this one, that why did that change? And I think I can only assume that that's the shift that happened. Maybe our consciousness became aware of that prison type of situation or that trap, and that we broke through. Because if we are humans, but we're having a spiritual experience on the other side simultaneously, and maybe our soul said, no more of this. And maybe we took care of it in some way, because I really have experienced the change in my sessions. They're not like the books anymore.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yes.
So, kind of going off of that, if we're no longer part of that system that he wrote about in his books, which for anybody who's not familiar, he writes about this like whole like heavenly realm where people go on the other side to continue their learning and have all these experiences, ultimately with the goal of having their next reincarnation on Earth. So if we're no longer part of that system, are we still here for the same reasons? Did we ever really need to come here to grow spiritually, or is that just what we were being told?
What a question. That's the ultimate question that maybe none of us know. But I do want to say, and I'll talk about it in a second, but I also want to say that even though we've just said what we said here, the souls do still experience some of those same things, like going to the life selection room and watching the movie of the different lifetimes that they could choose from. Maybe they're given an option of 3 bodies and lives, and they can watch the movie of that life or go into it and see, like, to make the decision and feel it. And so these things do exist still. It's so I don't want to say that that we as souls are not still doing things like that. And then to get to your question about it's confusing to me, because aren't we perfect? Aren't we loving and more knowing as souls? And so then why do we come here? I still think that we come here for the experience. And I always ask, this question. So, for example, on the other side, we're in total love, bliss. We don't have a physical body. We don't even have an emotional body, because the emotional body of the human comes with the human form. And so we don't have those extremes of emotions. And so we want to, every time I ask that, the answer is that it's fun. And so I think it's a challenge. I think maybe it gets boring. I don't know if it could possibly get boring on the other side, but it's the contrast. And so I even had a client that it was hilarious. He and his soul group thought that every single thing that happened on earth was hilarious. And even murder, trauma, the most horrific things from their perspective in the soul state, they thought it was all hilarious. And so, not everybody's ready to hear that here, but and it was funny. And we were both laughing a lot because of how funny they were perceiving things as souls. So I had another client. This was a fascinating story. She and her husband, they had been married for, I think, 25 or 30 years and this was all in the plan that he would then have an affair and their marriage would end. And the souls explained that they had made this agreement because they thought it would be fun. They thought that her being so devastated would be fun, and him being so regretful and alone after that, because it wouldn't work out with the affair, and then she would leave him, and then he would be alone. He thought it would be fun to be devastated and alone for the rest of his life. And then she actually had another love come into her life that was planned, and she would find love and happiness, and he would know about it. And they thought that this whole dynamic would be fun.
Wow.
I know. So really, I think the answer is that we come for the experience. The emotional body here is so intense, and we can't get that on the other side. The physical experience is so intense. And we want to know how well we can do with things. Another thing is that we love the progress. We love the healing progress. So it's go and process. So if we have a wound, like a broken leg or a broken heart, or we've gone through some major traumas, we as souls love the process of going from that devastation through the healing process. We love that part of it.
Wow, I can relate to that in my own life experience, actually.
Me too.
Do you think there's a sense in which it's still important that we're loving and compassionate through all of this, that we're trying to bring out that nature in us? Or is it just for the experience and that's it?
It's all about love. Just like the vast majority of the NDErs who come back, it's the same in Life Between Lives hypnotherapy. The theme is always, always, always to love. So that's the number one. We are meant to love. We are meant to forgive all. We're meant to love everyone, be loving. That is the number one purpose and theme of life as a human.
Amazing.
Yes.
So this might be another tough question. So if you're not comfortable with it, that's okay. But I know there's a lot of people freaked out because I hear from them on my channel quite frequently about this whole prison planet thing. For those people, is there any way we could set their mind at ease? When it's their time to pass on, is there a way that they can tell if they're dealing with a truly loving entity that's there to help them, or somebody who might have ulterior motives?
That's a great question. And based on all of the NDEs and LBL hypnotherapy sessions I've witnessed, I never think personally that there's anything to worry about when we cross over. To me, it always seems loving and benign and absolute bliss and oneness and pure joy and love. So I would really hope that anybody who has those kinds of fears just drop it, because the fear is what they're going to attract, or be in confusion. And I would try to work on getting really right with it here and now, and really adhere to the truth of the multiverse and the all that is, which is love. And so I'm a perpetually hopeful and positive person, so it's really hard for me to latch on to anything fearful. So even though I had heard about it, read about it, and even pondered it so much, it's like trying to grasp water or sand. I can't hold on to fearful concepts like that. So once I went through that phase of like, oh, wait a minute, maybe it really is like that, it didn't stick for me. So I hope that other people can kind of move through that phase too of like, well, maybe that's a possibility, but ultimately, why don't we just go ahead and believe all the NDEers, right? Because nobody's coming back and saying that. They're all talking about the love and the bliss. Same for LBL hypnotherapy. So in my opinion, we always go into bliss and love and oneness and joy. And I've never heard otherwise. Okay, there are people who have had hellish NDEs. I've never looked into those personally, so I can't speak about that. But that's never been the case with the Life Between Lives hypnotherapy session. There has been a little bit of darkness, actually, that I have come across in one. I only can remember one client who, or two, there might have actually been two in all 15 years of doing this. And they had agreed, they had made an agreement to embody with both the light and the dark. Those really scared me because I could feel the darkness. I'm an empath, and those were difficult sessions for me because my body responded with fear. I could feel the resonance of it in my body. But so that was very strange. And so there is darkness, and many humans do have some darkness in them, but it's a choice and it's an experience. I think that we get to choose these things at the soul level. And yeah, so that was a little bit of a tangent, but really I would hope that people would somehow just learn to let go of fear and worry, because if you tell yourself, I am part of God and I'm going home to be one with God and the light, then you can purposefully do that. We are sovereign. We have the ability to command with our will and align with our soul and, say, when I cross over, I am going into the light, the ultimate oneness, all that is light, the benevolence, the goodness, the light, and the love of God, or the all that is, whatever you want to call it. So I think I would say just command that you're doing that.
I love that answer that you gave, and I agree 100%. My personal thought on it is that we have the power to create some of this. Even with near-death experiences, it seems that sometimes people have a part in creating what they're experiencing, so that if people are going into it afraid of a certain thing happening, then I don't know if that would be enough to create the experience for themselves, but I think it's an unnecessary fear to carry with them.
I agree. And I do agree with you about being creators.
Mm.
And so it's very important for people to keep that in mind with their thoughts, their words, their feelings throughout life, because not only are we creating this, but yes, we could be creating what we experience there as well.
Yeah. So I know we've touched on this a little bit, but could you share a little bit more about soul families and how those relationships work?
This is fascinating because soul groups are people that you incarnate with over and over again, and there's a purpose. And the purposes are to fulfill these agreements that we talked about before about the virtues, right? How if someone wants to learn about love, then maybe someone in their soul group is going to play the villain, and the antagonist. And so they agree to it beforehand. So soul groups could be big, but we could incarnate with only a few or very few members of our soul group. Or some could have several, and they come in the form of family members. Not everybody in your family is in your soul group. Not always both your parents, all your siblings, or it could be one, or none, or other people that are friends, or a teacher, or a boss, or people that could be in your soul group. different soul groups can have a purpose. There could be a soul group of truth. There could be a soul group of protectors, healers, but they're not limited that way. There could be a mixture within the soul group as well. There are adjacent soul groups, and they learn from each other and teach each other. So other people that you might feel like they could be in your soul group, they might be in an adjacent one that's very close, and you participate in lifetimes together, or you learn together on the other side. And yeah, what other questions do you have about soul groups?
I just find that the interactions, like the relationships, interesting for myself. Like, do we come to challenge each other in a certain way, or a specific relationship will give us a certain lesson?
Yes. I recently had a client whose husband passed away, and she's very sad, obviously. And so when we went into the past life part of the session, she met with him as her husband. And I think that we might have visited more than one lifetime, and they were always spouses. And then when she crossed over, of course, he was right there to greet her and be together with her. And so we explored this quite a bit. And they just love each other eternally. And he got really good at being without her. So they do these lifetimes where, okay, let's be together and be totally in love. And then there's going to be an ending. One of us will die. And over lifetimes of that, he got good at being alone, and she hasn't gotten good at it yet. She's devastated. She hates God. She's so angry at this whole process of incarnating and life. And she just wants to be with him. And so he was explaining to her on the other side, like, you're working on learning how to be alone and without me, even though I'm here and we're always coming back together, but for the rest of this lifetime, he's not with her. So this is not the first time I've come across this theme. I have had this with other clients where they do have a soulmate and they do incarnate over and over again, but they each need to learn how to be without the other. And usually one of them has gotten better at it and the other one is still learning it. And then I had a session with her daughter, and this man is her stepfather, the soulmate of the mom. But the daughter had an extraordinarily close relationship with him, as if it's her dad as well. So when it was her turn, she found that they had also had multiple lifetimes together as a family, and that she was their child, and they loved that combination of incarnating together over and over again. And so the love is eternal between the souls. And then, yes, about your question about teaching each other things, we will play different roles to teach each other specific things. And it's very interesting to visit the different lifetimes to see how that has been playing out from lifetime to lifetime, and then comparing it to this one.
Yeah, that's just fascinating to me, because I can even look at the relationships in my life and see that these different people play these different roles. Like, I have I have several sisters, but they each relate to me in a different way. One of them is like my support that I've had since I was 2 years old, and then one is the person I can work out emotional issues with, and I could just go on, and this stuff is just so clear to me even as I'm going through this life. It would be fascinating to see what had happened in other lifetimes.
Oh my gosh, yes. You would probably love exploring the relationship with your sisters in other lifetimes. I mean, it's, these things are, I had a situation where I needed to speak up to one of my best friends, and the need was so deep in my soul, and it was so hard for me because I cherished the friendship, but then I learned the reason that I needed to speak up. It was about I had to defend another person and sort of protect another person. And then I learned that we had been in a lifetime together before where I didn't speak up. But luckily our friendship survived this, and it went on silent for a few months, but then we reunited. So I'm so glad. I mean, I had to do what I had to do, but it was completely related to another lifetime. So we changed our karma, and we're just extremely close friends. And I did what I needed to do for myself and the other person in this life. And it, like I said, it was completely related to another life. So sometimes we feel like we're going through something that's really hard and that's very intense. I think that when we are experiencing something that's very intense with another person, it is part of our soul journey with that person, and we're meant to be experiencing these things. But then if we try to observe ourselves and do the best that we can, we are resolving it. We should try to resolve things in the best way that we can, because I believe we are affecting the other lifetimes because they're simultaneous, and we can improve those connections across time.
Wow, that's fascinating. So you think that something we do in this lifetime could actually change something in another lifetime?
I do. I think that there are so many timelines. Now I'm going to get quantum physics on you.
Good. I love
Okay.
quantum physics.
Okay. So I believe that for every decision that we make in this lifetime, there's another alternate universe with another us that's making the other decisions. So it's as if almost infinite parallel realities are playing themselves out so that we as a soul can experience all the variations of everything that we came here to experience as Stephanie, for example, to the point where, do you want me to go really?
Yeah, let's go there.
I actually saw this with my own eyes. And I have a video about it on my YouTube channel, but I'll tell you now. My friend came, she and her husband move. He's with the military, or a contractor. So they're placed in different countries every couple of years. So they were coming back here as a home base for a period of time. So because of that, they were staying in a hotel. And I was going to meet with her and her son, with myself and my son. And her husband was not going to join us because it's like two women. And, it was like more like a female lunch. But even though we brought our kids, he didn't really feel like joining us. But anyway, so he was just going to pass time window shopping out, in this downtown area. And so when I was driving the car to park to meet her at the restaurant, I saw him and her and their son in their car parked. And I said to my son, "Oh, there they are," and then I drove and I parked. And then I'm not going to go into the details because I don't want to make it too long, but we met at the restaurant. And after I parked, we were walking to the restaurant and I saw him in the car, just like on his phone, still in the same place, still on his parked. And then she wasn't there anymore. And he was just kind of like on his cell phone, just sitting in the driver's seat. And I didn't say hi because I'm shy, but, and we were headed to the restaurant. So I was like, "Oh, there he is." And we went to the restaurant. But then after lunch, she and I were going to walk back to our cars. And I said, "Oh yeah, I saw you parking." And that was impossible in her mind because we parked next to each other, it turned out. And I said, "No, I saw your husband." And she said, "No, he didn't come. At the last minute, he decided to stay back at the hotel." And only she and her son came, and they actually ended up parking next to me in the parking lot somewhere else. And when we were walking back, that car was no longer there. So what had happened? I told her, and she says, "Don't tell me, you're freaking me out, Stephanie." But I said, "Oh, it's a parallel reality." I was excited that I had seen. I said, "I saw you here and you there, but they were different realities." And I saw her husband. So what happened was their thinking was, we're going to go together. This plan is what's going to happen. Last minute, he stayed home and only she left. But I saw both of them play out in the reality I saw him there, and I saw her and her car next to mine literally in a parking lot building that was not on the street where he had parked. And I had seen her in the car too. So that happened. And I have other friends who have seen similar things where they'll see someone walking toward them, and then, impossibly a minute later, they'll see that same person walking toward them again in a situation where it's impossible to, go around and come back. So what I believe is that going back to the original question, I do believe that, because if we are going into a past life and healing, this is what we do in hypnotherapy. We heal the trauma, we heal the situation with the people. Well, some of us do, right? I'm a hypnotherapist who likes to really heal things as we go along rather than just gloss over them and keep going. So when we're healing these relationships, these traumas, these situations, then I do believe we might actually be healing them for real. And I absolutely do believe that, because we are really dealing with the soul and the souls of others in our sessions that has to have an effect on reality,
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that, Stephanie. And thank you for sharing everything that you've shared with us today. I know I asked some pretty deep questions, but I really enjoyed this conversation. And I'd like to give you a chance to share about what you do and more about your book and anything else that you'd like to mention.
Okay, thank you so much. Yes, so I do energy healing, and all of my sessions right now are over the phone. So I do hypnotherapy over the phone with anybody around the world, life between lives hypnotherapy, past life regressions, energy healing. And so that's all on stephaniekraft.com, where you can find all the work that I do. And then this book that I'm a part of, an anthology with 20 other women, and it's called Women Living in Alignment. And this book came out, and it's already a #1 bestseller internationally in the United States on the first day. So that was a great thing. And I just have one chapter in this book, and you can find that on my website as well, and on Amazon, of course. And I think that's it about what I do. Thank you for allowing me to share that.
Of course. Thank you so much again for being willing to do this interview with me. I've really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed the depth of conversation that we had.
Thank you so much, Melissa.
Thank you for watching and listening. Your views, likes, comments, and shares truly make the biggest difference in supporting this channel. Don't forget to check the show notes for all the links to today's guest, as well as my links. You'll find me on social media at Love Covered Life, my website, lovecoveredlife.com, and the Be a Guest link for anybody who would like to be a guest on the channel. I have great news. Love Covered Life podcast is coming available on audio podcast. You can find it wherever you listen to your audio podcasts.